Hi, I'm Phil Constantine. In this edition of Travels with Phil, we're traveling back in time to 1977. This is one in a series of interviews I did for a program called To the Point for Rice University in Houston. I helped create this program, which showcased some of the brilliant people associated with Rice. This episode is with psychology professor Dr. Diane Rathjen. We discuss some of the issues related to work she's done on self-esteem in children between 9 and 11. I have added images to this video, but the audio remains exactly as it was broadcast back in October 1977.
It happened in almost everyone's life. Those times from somewhere around 9 years old to 11 years old when you felt awkward or nothing quite worked right or things just didn't seem to quite go the way you thought they should. What can be done about these kind of problems, and do they get too severe? Do they get so severe that sometimes outside help is needed? We'll talk about that in just a moment.
To the Point, presented by Rice University.
Welcome to the program. I'm Phil Constantine, and with me is Dr. Diane Rathjen, who is a professor of psychology at Rice University. Doctor or Diane, welcome to the program.
Hello, glad to be here.
And you are doing, in association with some people from the Texas Research Institute of Mental Sciences, conducting a class on people or children or young adults, whichever way you want to look at it, kids from around 9 to 11 when they're going through this somewhat, what I always called the junior high syndrome, where you weren't quite yet an adult and you weren't quite yet, or you still weren't just a child. What seems to be the real need for more than just going home and talking to mom and dad saying Billy's teasing me about being short or something like that?
Well, I think you've got mentioned a very good point there, that this particular age has a lot of unique problems, particularly things like teasing, being rejected by the other children, all these sorts of things that we all remember. And actually, what seems to be lacking, if parents quite often offer good suggestions to the child, but what really a lot of children need is more specific modeling of exactly how to deal with different situations. And quite often parents have good ideas, but they can't show the child in a real specific way exactly what to do. Like handling teasing. Mom and dad might say, well, just ignore it. But that's real hard to do. And we try to actually provide some modeling and practice and feedback.
In a course such as this, how do you decide what exactly should be taught beforehand? I mean, having not taught the course yet, how do you decide to structure the course itself?
Well, actually, we've taught the course several times before, and what we try to do is just ask the students or the children themselves what are the difficulties they're having. We have some ideas what these might be, and then we always ask them.
So you try and tailor the course to the individual needs of the child involved.
And there are certain problems that turn out to be very typical. Communicating with parents, handling teasing, making friends. These are the ones that are the most important. To some extent, I can see people saying, but, this isn't that much of a problem, being teased about being short or something like that. Why would you need special therapy of some sort or another to learn how to cope with this? Does it really affect people that badly? Well, I think there's basically two answers to that. First of all, these problems may not be incredibly serious, but it's important and quite often helpful to try to learn how to deal with them before they become serious. In other words, these are the kinds of skills that just normal children, everybody needs to know. It helps everybody how to make friends, how to be more at ease with other people, how to express your feelings. So it's a kind of thing, even if you're not having a real difficult problem, it can be useful. The other point I guess I should make is these are the sorts of skills that you're usually left up to pick up on your own. In other words, they're not systematically taught in the schools. So we're just trying to be a little more systematic. And I guess one other thing I should mention is that contrary to what some people still believe, that your personality is shaped by age 5 or whatever, actually there's a lot of learning takes place all throughout childhood and adolescence. And it's the people who can't cope with situations now who do tend to have problems later. These are the kinds of things that you don't necessarily outgrow. The people may end up in prison, unemployed, marital difficulties, in mental institutions, all sorts of things if, for example, they deal aggressively with interpersonal situations.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is these are the kinds of skills I think everybody can benefit from. You can always do a little better, feel a little more comfortable.
You know, it's been said many times, both in serious-minded things and sometimes even in the daily TV soap operas, that one little incident as a child affected somebody for the rest of their life, either leading them up to be a murderer or leading them up to be a very warm and giving human being. Is this sort of the attitude that you're taking, that, you know, having learned how to cope with daily problems as a child, it will help you not only as a child, but later it will help you as an adult, to the extent that another course you teach is how to be assertive in your job as a professional?
I think that's true, that if people were able to learn these skills earlier in life, perhaps there wouldn't be the need for assertiveness training for adults.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if you learn how to relate to people, how to deal with conflict, these things can help you out later. So it's not a question so much of one incident ruining a person's life, but it's a question, if you can't cope once, you're not going to be able to do any better the next time around.
Mm-hmm.
So if a child teases you today, he'll tease you again tomorrow. If you haven't learned anything in between, the problem just gets worse and worse.
Now, how can you tell when you've actually got a child that needs this special training, rather than just this was their first shot at it and they just didn't get it the first time around?
Well, I think, as I said before, any child could benefit from more systematic teaching of these sorts of skills. But in terms, there's also a motivational question. The children who are really interested, the children who themselves feel they're not happy with the way things are in their environment. They feel that they would like more friends, or they would like to feel more comfortable, or they would like to be able to communicate with their parents better.
Is it not possible, though, to maybe develop a false sense of security by saying, well, I've taken a class, so you can't tease me anymore?
Well, we hope that the sense of security is based on actual success.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we aim for. And as a matter of fact, we keep refining our techniques. If certain things, we use a really approach, why don't you try this and see how it works?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it doesn't. Sometimes it always doesn't. We have a few other techniques that we could teach, and they could try that. It's kind of an ever-growing process.
Well, what exactly, let's get into some of the things you actually do in the class itself. Say you I can give you an example from my own junior high school days. I had a friend in one of my classes that was going prematurely bald, and this is obviously sticks out when you're about 10 and 11 years old. And in his case, he got very, very upset when people teased him about being bald. Now, what would your class, or what would your training, what would be the first step you'd do? Would you have him explain the situations first, or how would you go about it? Or actually go further back, how would you deal with the parents when they're coming up and saying, we would like to have the child come in the class?
Well, I think I would find out if the child himself felt that he wanted to join the class, or he thought that it was appealing or interesting. We'd go ahead and recruit him. And then in terms of the teasing itself, we would offer him a couple of different possibilities of work with other children. And one of these might be learning to express how he feels when other people tease him, to tell other people, I really don't like it when you call me Baldy, I'd rather you call me by my name.
Mm-hmm.
And now this is the kind of thing that's very difficult to do. It's much easier to respond to teasing by teasing back. But one thing we try is to have children express their feelings, let the other children know that this is hurting their feelings. And sometimes this works very well, because the other children don't always realize how cruel a nickname might be.
Mm-hmm.
But your next question will probably be, this is very easy to say, but how does a child actually do it? It's very hard to say, I don't like it when you call me Baldy. We would...
Short of just hitting the other person.
Yeah, uh-huh. We would just perhaps go ahead and do some role-playing, have him practice with another student, have another student call him the name and have him practice his responses and see if he feels more comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Is there such a thing as an effective rate or effectiveness rate in this course of, children who eventually go back out and have what is, I believe, possibly even called the title of your course, of Feeling Good, Self-Esteem, where they do have self-esteem even as a child?
Well, that's what we're trying to look at. We've looked at a variety of different measures, and it seems so far that the children are able to learn alternate ways to handle situations. They can think of more ways to deal with problems than they used to be able to.
Mm-hmm.
We also notice a lot of differences in their nonverbal behavior. A lot of children might be shuffling their feet or mumbling, not having good eye contact, a lot of things that get in the way of being effective, communicating, making friends. And we've noticed a lot of changes in these sorts of things.
Has this kind of thing ever been applied, say, to children with learning language difficulties, or sometimes called the hyperactive children?
Yes, one of our early classes was with children with learning disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And it was particularly useful with them because those are the children who are more likely to get teased or to run into frustrating situations.
Mm-hmm. How do you set up a course like that then? Or let us say, somebody, say a school district is interested in, trying to start one of their own. What would be the basic requirements for trying to put together a class of this type, short of having you come out and doing it yourself?
Well, actually, we're trying to put together some written materials on the
Mm-hmm.
course, and we eventually hope to train other people to lead it. Actually, we designed the course originally for use in the classroom, and so that the school teacher herself could offer the course.
Mm.
And so we are working on a teacher's manual and various other materials.
Is it that simple a format? Besides getting to the point of, tailoring it to the individual, is the format simple enough that it could be just easily adapted in, the times that teachers do have, assuming you realize that how busy teachers are already with doing all the regular business?
Well, I think for the teachers, most of them don't have time to take an individual child aside and go through the program.
Mm-hmm.
So we've tried to set up a program that could be used for the whole class at once. In other words, something where it would be an involving kind of a lesson, like a social studies lesson, where you
Right.
could cover one or two skills, whenever you perhaps had the time, or offer a whole course by devoting an hour a week to it or whatever.
Would this kind of program be similar to some of the modern day coping mechanism courses, such as TA for Kids or TA for Tots, I believe is one of the titles of the books? Is this sort of possibly like the transcendental analysis, or
It's transactional
and
analysis
transactional
is
analysis?
what
I
you're
knew
thinking
something
of.
was wrong about that. Or parent effectiveness training, or several of I'm okay, you're okay, several of these genre of teaching methods.
Well, actually, you've lumped several together now. I think the most important difference between ours and the TA is that we focus somewhat more on the specific behaviors. In other words, we discuss how the child feels about being teased and that sort of thing, but we move on and actually practice, role play, specific things he could do. So ours is somewhat more skill-oriented. It's almost like a curriculum.
Rather than theory, it's practical application.
A little bit more. I mean, rather than just kind of discussing your problems and sharing your feelings, which of course may be valuable for children to know that other children feel upset when they're teased also. But we try to go one step beyond and actually practice and different ways of coping.
There has been some stigma in this country about going to a psychologist if you're an adult. Have you had any reaction, or shall we say backlash, from many of the children who now are being teased that they had to go to a school to learn how to cope with being teased?
That's an interesting point because most of the children seem particularly happy to be in a group. The idea that it was a group and a class and the fact that the first one was being held on the Rice campus appealed to them. They thought that was very fun and interesting. And the course is being offered for normal, ordinary children to deal with the kinds of problems. Oh, on the first day with our first course, we asked the children if indeed they had been somewhat dragged there by their parents, which caused quite a bit of laughter. They all chuckled, but all seemed happy to be there and were really enjoying it.
How did you start this first off in the community? Your first class. How did you let people know that you were there and that you were not going to be doing some strange things with their children or putting them through moralizing when they may not know what the morals were being that you were teaching?
Well, we originally did some of the work as volunteers in the school system, and we offered this as a kind of a program just if people were interested.
One other thing that has come to mind, that there's still a little bit of feeling of some bad feeling about sensitivity training. And I don't know if you're familiar with all of the connotations that go with the word there, but there was a feeling that if you get so involved with worrying about every single thing that you're going to say about to every single person, that you'd no longer actually be yourself anymore. You'd spend all your time worrying about possibly offending someone, and then you'd, eventually get just so built up on the inside that you'd have problems with yourself.
I think that's an interesting point because there again we try to get away from the exclusive focus on thoughts and feelings. We try to go ahead and say, how can you actually deal with the situation? If a person were to say or do this, what could you say or do? So we practice on the action, not just the thoughts and feelings.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for coming on. My guest has been Dr. Diane Rathjen, who is a professor of psychology at Rice University. I'm Phil Constantine. Thanks for tuning in.
To the Point is produced by the Rice University Information Office at the studios of Rice Radio, KTRU, in Houston.
Thank you very much for watching this video. Please feel free to leave comments down below as long as the language is family friendly. And if you would like to subscribe to my channel, just click on the button over on the right-hand side. Thank you very much.